I want you to get a job at the end of the day. And when I was going through portfolio reviews, like all of this feedback that I'm giving was feedback that I've gotten that helped me get better.
What's up, designers? My name is John, aka The Design Guy, and I'm back reviewing another one of your portfolio websites. This is a one-on-one portfolio review that I did with a design student who just graduated named Gia. Gia wasn't having much luck with the job applications that she was already sending in. In this one-on-one portfolio review, we looked at both her resume and her portfolio website to come up with a bunch of different ideas of how she can improve it. We discussed how she could better format her resume to really highlight the company and the experience that she gained, and how to better format her design projects to better communicate her process and the outcome that she came up with. If you're a designer, photographer, illustrator, engineer, marketer, and you have a portfolio website that you're looking to improve, then definitely check out the link in the description to sign up for your very own portfolio review. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. And with that said, let's get into the review.
So, Gio, tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell me where you're at. I saw that you went to MICA, Maryland Institute College of Arts. Give me a little bit of background on what you're looking to do and what you'd like to get out of this portfolio review.
Okay, so yeah, I did go to the Maryland Institute College of Arts. I also kind of did some printmaking there as well, and I also did some 3D animation. But kind of I've been applying for jobs, and kind of what I'm looking for now is like more of a critique, because I've applied to a couple of jobs and I haven't been a candidate to move forward. So I'm trying to get some like critique to see what I could be doing better to land more jobs, or at least get more interviews.
When did you graduate? 2022?
Yes.
Okay. And are you currently working?
Yes, I work for a mental health practice in Florida. I work remotely.
Okay. And you're doing design work for them?
Yeah.
Okay. So I took a little bit of a click through on your portfolio. We'll go ahead and open that. What I want to start first is let's go to your resume first. And so this is your resume. I like the layout. I'm curious as to why you chose this sort of typeface. Is that you, would you say? Or how did you land on that?
Honestly, I was just looking for something more professional, and I just kind of like the vibe of that.
Gotcha. Okay. I asked the question because immediately my first impression is like, this is a little older, it feels not like something someone of your age who's coming out of design school may have as their first typeface choice. My thought is like, play around with it, like think of a typeface, try to find a typeface that's you and describes your personality. A serif immediately kind of brings to the table a little bit of like, I don't want to say refinement, but it brings sort of this older, kind of like more reframed sort of feeling to it. That is just something visually that I kind of immediately notice. I look through these not internships, your employment. So we have graphic designer at Healthy Hearts and Minds, revitalize brand identity. And then this is also kind of like what I mean. Like you have all of the descriptions kind of set in one. I think it's potentially a little tiny, the font size. And I think italicized descriptions might be a little much, potentially. Revitalize brand identity in order to help meet its long-term goals, design digital and print publication and promotional tools for a marketing campaign, develop style for use with social media, manage social media and website accounts. So that's a good statement. It's a good start. You're currently there. So one, this is kind of like a small little detail of like, if this is a position that you're currently at, you can write it in the present tense. Trying to like write these as you're still there, but I'm trying to think of like, how would you, because I'm guessing you did some work for the brand identity that in order to help meet its long-term goals is a little vague. You could say something along the lines of like constantly refining the brand identity to align with company sales goals or whatever, like give me a little bit more detail on that of like, what are the goals? What are the long-term goals? Is it revenue? Is it customer acquisition? Is it to align with a more youthful demographic? Things like this. Design digital and print publication materials for marketing campaigns. So you could simplify that sentence of like, design materials for ongoing print and digital marketing campaign. Develop style for use with social media. I would kind of bucket that as like, you can combine those two sentences. I manage and maintain, or I manage and develop something along those lines of all touch points for any of the company's marketing campaigns on print, digital, and social platforms, like something along those lines. That's not necessarily a graphic design task, right? Like that's just the thing that you do in between all of the design stuff. Answer customer inquiries via live chat. Again, not necessarily a graphic design task. Is something more of a result of you potentially working at a smaller company that needs you to do many things. Printmaking teacher assistant, that's always a nice thing because it kind of shows that you have experience working with like more hands-on mediums and stuff like this. Assistant in the preparation of setup materials, equipment. I know you're probably writing these descriptions to be very assisted in the preparation of setup materials and equipment. That doesn't give me a whole lot of like graphic design, right? That gives me exactly like more admin tasks of what you had to do in between the fun stuff. Like what was the fun stuff of being a printmaker, a TA for a printmaker, you know? Was it
Yeah.
like getting to work on developing collections of prints for the, you know, whatever the organization to sell, working with students in refining their designs, you know, like what were those, like, are there more details to that? Because like, you know, when you're applying to graphic design jobs, like setting up materials and equipment is not going to be a thing at a company. I saw this one for barista in Starbucks. I would just pull that off.
Okay.
And if does GD stand for graphic design internship?
Yeah.
So then spell that out. I think I would change the hierarchy here. So I think you need to have a better heading for these sections, right? Because they're all starting to kind of blur together. Then instead of graphic designer, like I would have healthy hearts and mind above that, potentially like not the same size as the description copy. And then below I'd have your position. You could even kind of combine these. It's not so much about this title as it is that you worked at a company that you got professional experience with. So that's something to consider. And then for something like this, you could say like design intern. Make it really clear like what you were doing there. GD internship does not mean anything to me really. Education, skills. If are a lot of places asking for references?
Honestly, like I just put them there because like that's typically what I see in a lot of resumes.
Don't do it.
Okay.
Unless they ask for references, you don't have to put them. They're not going to ask for references until the end of the process anyway.
Hey, if you're enjoying this portfolio review and you feel like you've already learned something that you can implement on your own portfolio website, then go ahead and comment portfolio upgrade on this video. I would really appreciate it. Thank you.
I think the thing that's working against you here is like, I understand that you have Starbucks as like a position and then you have more Starbucks here. But again, like when you're applying to like a design role,
Right.
people really don't want to see anything else other than roles that level back up to that. So like, yes, I understand that you might have worked at Starbucks and, you know, like I get that. I worked at a gas station, but when I started to apply to jobs for design, no one knew about those things. Not because of any reason other than like I didn't want anyone to be distracted. The only things that mattered are the things that the design experience that I gained. That's it. And so when we put other things on that, it sort of gives this perception that like you're not actually experienced enough. You know, like it's kind of you are trying to make it seem like you've done a lot when the things that you're adding to kind of do that are things that are not related to the role whatsoever, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Hey, if you're finding this video helpful, don't just stare. Subscribe. Please.
Let's go back to website stuff. Okay, so homepage, cool. What kind of design, like what are your interests? Like this is an illustration of you. So like that tells me something.
Honestly, like what I really like to do is I've been kind of getting into like 3D rendering, which is kind of like shown throughout like a lot of my pieces. But I just like that illustration, so I was like, oh, it's a neat illustration. Let me like put that up there.
Okay. 3D, do you have examples of this 3D stuff that you're working on?
It's a part of like every project has a 3D component to it.
Okay, so what is the 3D part?
I made a keychain.
Ah, okay.
It was like a bottle opener. This like hypothetical brewery slash burger joint.
Let's start from the top here.
Mhm.
So this is like a passion. This is like a kind of hypothetical project, right?
Yeah.
What are you using by it? Is this Wix?
It's actually a website called Nice Page. It's
Nice
like a
page.
little like block builder.
Good heading. I like this heading. This is a better heading than a lot of portfolios I looked at where it's just like brand identity, right? Like I just made a TikTok video about this yesterday that you want to have something that's going to catch people's eyes. And this is on that track. So good. I am not a huge fan of two columns or multiple columns. So for example, like up here, and again, I think your hierarchy needs a little bit of work, not only on the resume, but stuff like this, right? Because like this is important information. And so when you put it next to an image like this, it starts me off like my eye immediately goes to the image.
Mhm.
and I miss out on all this. Like I end up just scrolling past and being like, okay, cool, let's like look at images. And so like in a way, you want to force people to read this stuff, right? How do we do that? Well, we don't put images next to some of this text if we know that like this is going to help explain my process, right? Like so potentially moving this image down somewhere. Also, like you have the same image at the top right there, it's just there and here.
Mhm.
So again, we're kind of doing this thing of like we're having repetition or we're adding things that because we feel like we don't have enough, which is resulting in actually hurting us a little bit more. So that's something to think about. I know like with this, you with a project like this, because this is hypothetical, you kind of build this out, probably push it a little bit further to have additional images and stuff. Why is the cow upside down here?
It was so the whole concept of the restaurant was that it was a burger joint, but we're trying to play on like Mad Cow, kind of like have like a little bit of playfulness and irony. So I like kind of thought it would be fun to have it upside down because like sometimes you tip cow.
Can I just say objectively,
Mhm.
it looks like a dead cow. So something to think about. Is this a school project?
Oh yes.
So I know how these things can go because you're like, you might have been working in a group and everyone's like, yeah, this is a great idea and stuff like that. But now that someone who's not inside that group is looking at this, when I see a cow upside down with no eyes, on a glass, I'm thinking, is this cow potentially dead? Right. So, and is that part of this brand or something? Right. If there was a name like Tipped Cow or the Tipsy Cow or something like that, that could potentially tie in that element. But because mod is a name that I'm not familiar with, I don't know what mod is, it doesn't necessarily tie to this idea of a cow that is upside down. So, something to think about
Mhm.
in terms of the overall approach for something like this, right? Even this solution, this sentence here, playful and bold visual identity inspired by letterpress prints featuring an upside down cow icon. An upside down cow icon does not explain
Mhm.
the concept of why the cow is upside down, right? So then it just kind of sounds like we just dropped an upside down cow on that, within this and sort of went with it. So something to think about with building out projects. Now, listen, I'm saying this, these portfolio reviews, I want to make sure
Mhm.
are super helpful. And so at times, like I can really get into the details of and try to give as much pieces or tips as I can. And in no way is this supposed to be like, this isn't negative in the sense, right? I want you to get better. And so I'm trying to pull out all these things that someone, whether you're in school, they may not look at this, they just look at the page and like, yeah, you completed the assignment, stuff like that. Like,
Right.
I want you to get a job at the end of the day. And when I was going through portfolio reviews, like all of this feedback that I'm giving was feedback that I've gotten that helped me get better. And so again, I don't want it to make it seem like I'm just like ripping this up. Yes and no, that's happening, but it's all with like I want you to do as best as possible. So
Yeah.
in writing these statements, something to keep note on is reusing similar words throughout all these. So you use trendy a lot. Now, trendy is a nice little buzzword, but trendy, in your background statement, your challenge and your solution should only really be used once. I don't like to repeat words while I'm writing
Mhm.
because it over and over again just sounds like, oh, well, it's trendy, it's trendy, it's trendy. But what does that mean exactly? Like what is trendy about this? What is the trend that we're trying to follow or something like this, right? So something to think about as well as you're going through your writings, because not many people agree with this, but I think writing is just as important as being a good designer. They go hand in hand. And so this is also something that you will eventually get better at over time. You're young also. Listen, you just graduated school. I commend you for signing up for a portfolio review and, allowing me to kind of look at this stuff. I'm very, very aware of that. But again, I want you to get good. I want you to get really good. And so I'm going to give you as much as possible to work on.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
So for a layout, I like to look at it like this, right? So we have our
Mhm.
setup here, background, challenges, solution. I necessarily wouldn't jump into immediate like end results, like what I'm calling here are like things that are finished, right?
Right.
If anything, you'd want to walk me through, and this kind of would help this idea of like not knowing what mod cow is, going through like a breakdown of how you guys came up with the name, how you guys eventually came up with the logo, going through what color palettes you actually chose for what reasons before you show me any of this finished stuff. Another thing that I noticed on your mood boards This is a grid of images, right? This isn't a mood
Yeah.
board necessarily. I think you can just make this like one image. As designers, we love to be like, yeah, we have a mood board together, especially now because everything's digital. Like it feels like we
Right.
have to do that, because before we would have like a board and tack a bunch of photos and images on there and stuff. So I don't really put a lot of mood board images up for any of my projects. I haven't ever, because I think it's silly. And it's also something that you do, a part of your process that doesn't necessarily need to be surfaced, but doesn't mean you can't have it. So my recommendation for something like, if you do want to show a mood board, show it as if it was a physical mood board. Show it on a big frame or big art board that has images kind of all over the place and things like that. Don't make it organized, because then it's like, I followed these 6 or these 8 images. This was the guide. And that's not really the case. I mean, it is a
Right.
little bit, but like it's not completely the case, right? Because then it's sort of setting me up to think, oh, you looked at these images and then you made things exactly like those images. With your hierarchy here, you want to kind of balance this a bit. Again, like what I was saying up here is where like I'm gonna skip over this image sometimes, or the copy here, because the image is next to it. I think like this is a instance where you could have a 2-column, but I think like this is so tiny that you sort of need to kind of watch out. Like if this is the only copy that you're going to add, does it even need to be there really? Also, watch this margin here. There's like here's the heading, here's the gap between the text. It should almost line up here.
Right.
Typography, yeah. So like stuff like this, typography, logo, type style. Can you break this up, right? Can you break up typography, the logo, and the style? Because I'm not getting a lot. Over here, I have some sort of logo lockup. Over here, I have some sort of pattern. Like I'm not getting a section about typography. I'm not getting a section about logo type. I'm not getting a section just devoted to style. So something to think about. Tell me about the logo. Give me that breakdown that I kind of mentioned before of like, how did you come up with the cow? Like, why did you choose the typeface? These fonts communicate the fusion of chic brewery ambience with the down-to-earth, wholesome appeal of barbecue house. Great. But why? Why do these fonts do that? All right. What was the reason why you picked it? Is it because the like kind of the bulgy roundness conveys a friendly tone? Is there something about its like somewhat geometric shape that you want like that relates back to some sort of like component of the brand identity? You know, like where is the reasoning in this? Logo serves as a nod to the restaurant's concept. What is the restaurant's concept? So these are just like,
Too vague.
kind of fluffy, Yeah, so I think like layout wise, you can kind of like reconfigure some of these things. It's a really like color would be like one of the first elements I want to see. Like one of the like this whole section, typography, logo, style, like set me up for the home run here. Let's tell a story. Like Mod Cow is a blank, 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 blank. It's a restaurant that is located here. And you can like add these details in as well. Like think of where it's located. Think of the area. Tell me about what's going on in that city or whatever. Tell me why a hypothetical owner would want to launch something like this in that area. If it ties back to whiskey, if it ties back to barbecue, like give me that story, right? That's the beginning of the story. Then below that, you have your challenge and your solution and stuff like that. Then you give me an introduction to this like solution, right? Your logo or how you develop the concept of the name. Then from there, you can get into assets like type and color. You could show me a mood board, and then you can get to the final sexy stuff that's like done and made, right? First, I want to say like you want to get that sort of like equation and that order down pat first before you start to do any image updates or anything like that. But then I would kind of figure out like what other images can I do? And also don't be afraid to not shove these into a slideshow just because you're trying to save space. Make this a long page, give people something to scroll and look at, because this page is now kind of short and this is the stuff that you want people to see, and it's actually hidden behind another image. Right. Think of that. I want to pause here and just see if you have any questions or anything like that. I'm only going to be able to kind of jump through one project. One other note I would say on your homepage really quickly is like your exact reasoning for why you had this illustration is kind of like what I mean with a lot of the kind of notes I gave.
Right.
You had said like, oh, it's a nice illustration, and I just kind of put it up there, right? I think like being a graphic designer is you have to make very intentional decisions. You have to know why you're making those decisions to be really good, I think. Like kind of do something haphazardly doesn't actually serve you in any way. Because what I thought initially was that you were kind of more of an illustrator when I saw this image, right? But that's not the case. Like you want to do design and you want to do, and you correct me if I'm wrong. So you can see how like that decision of like, oh, this is the only image I had and it was kind of nice, kind of resulted in something, in an outcome that you may or may not want. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it definitely. Now that like I guess like I'm seeing it from someone else's point of view, it does make a lot more sense.
It's really important to keep that in mind. For something like a portfolio website, it's really important to think of what are the people looking at this thing going to get from it. I don't design my portfolio website to be everything that I love. I
Mhm.
design it so that the people that view it are relate to it and find me like they find me approachable. Right. So if I go to my website, and again, I've said this in many reviews, I haven't updated this in like 6 years and I barely send it to anyone anymore. But when I design this, I designed it to be very plain. I designed it to be very simple. I don't want to overwhelm people when they come to this thinking that this is someone that is super designy, super hippy dippy creative, and I'm going to have a hard time talking to them because I'm not a creative. And so that's why I made it this way. But that was really important to me because I want to work with businesses that aren't creatives. You know, they're worried about their business and stuff. That idea, that intention has carried me through in a lot of different ways, you know, in decisions that I make for clients on projects, and again, my portfolio website and stuff. You know, if I had an illustration image here, people might think I'm an illustrator.
Mhm.
So something to keep in mind that will carry you through for the rest of your design career. I'll pause now and shut my mouth. Any questions or anything like that?
I guess some of the questions that I have or more just like content of my work. Like I
Mhm.
understand like a lot of the things that you like mentioned were very much just like structural and like about the portfolio itself, but it would also be nice to get a little bit of feedback on like the actual like content of a project.
In terms, which project would you like to kind of like walk through?
If it's possible, the last one, A Night to Remember. Just like
Why
the
this one? It's not a like a, you pick this one, it's the last one on the
yeah.
homepage. Do you like this
Mhm.
project?
Yeah, I do.
Why is it the last one on the homepage?
That is a good question. I guess it had more to do with like my workflow, and I'd started on other projects first, and then that one just kind of like ended up at the bottom because it was the last project I worked on.
So
And in the
yeah,
sense
you
of
know,
while working on my portfolio.
sure, sure. I raise these questions so that you can answer them, not so much
Mhm.
me. Because if it's something that you're excited about, it should be your first project. Designing emo, tailoring an event for a music lover. So the event is designed to cater to May's interests with a focus on the emo punk aesthetic. We already kind of got that. A music enthusiast who loves socializing with inspired the creation of an event called Emo Night. She created this event. It's in like her interest. Then you're saying again, the event is designed to cater to May's interests, right? She's creating it. Of course it is. Right.
Right.
So is there another reason? Is there more of a something that you can say like May wanted to connect with other music lovers in the emo rock scene, right? Or
Right.
scene, what you don't want to say scene, but emo scene, right? Challenge. The challenge was to create, so you don't have to repeat the challenge. You could just start off with create a graphic design. What is a graphic design? So what are we creating here? Create that effectively something that effectively captures the essence of emo punk. So it's almost like you want to create, May wants to create an experience
Mhm.
that captures the essence. I feel about the word essence of the emo punk scene. Yeah. So like that whole first sentence is like kind of. The design needs to be visually engaging. Of course it does. Like, do sit down for a bit and go over and say out loud like what it is what was the challenge here? The challenge was connecting music lovers, emo punk pop music lovers with a night they couldn't forget or something along those lines, right? Because of course, everything that we do needs to be visually engaging. Incorporating textured elements, is that like the big thing that you had texture in this design? Or is it more that like you wanted to create something that people would remember that would allow them to connect on a similar interest, right? Like that's the big takeaway for doing something like this. It's not so much like, you know, it has to be engaging. Like these are all very fluffy words that we like to kind of wrap around these. Created solution I created could just be a distinctive brand identity that resonates with the pop punk aesthetic, customized typography, curated imagery. So I'd nix that, and textured elements were strategically employed to evoke the edgy. The other thing that I've noticed kind of in your projects,
Mhm.
you've made the materials that would go along for this. But again, like I'm very story driven. So when I create a project, the content in my project needs to kind of tell this story. And so if I'm showing images like this as the mood board, can I create things that are like this, but in this style to help tell that story? This is a weird image, right? Like this is supposed to be like like the thing that they hold about Coldplay in people's hands at the show, but there's only one of them. And like this looks like sort of an ice cream when it's big and just overlaid like this, right?
Right.
So what can we do here to kind of like update that stuff? Cool, patches. Give me like 2 images of these patches. Give me like the flat patch and then give me the patch mocked up on something, like a small bag or something like that. I'm not a fan of like, hey, here's something in situation and then we float a bunch of stuff on top of it. So again, like, how can we better present these images? And again, in terms of the configuration or the layout of this stuff, it's very I think it's like upside down where like some of this stuff should be up front and I should see the final results towards the bottom of the page.
Mhm.
If you're going to go into the light wand, like the background of it, like this one section kind of just like takes that story of like, this is what we looked at. This bottom, these bottom row of images is what we looked at. Then we took those and created our own 3D model. So then that would be like the second section below that. And then like this is the final product. So like that would then be the bottom image, right? Like this doesn't tell me, like I read this from left to right, and sometimes I read both rows at the same time. I'm not getting any kind of story or anything like that from that layout. Does that kind of help with the content for you?
Yeah.
Any other questions outside of portfolio, stuff like that? I could do 2 questions and I gotta jump.
That's cool. I guess I have a personal question, like more for you. Like, how did you like put yourself out there and like end up being the designer that you currently are with a lot of experience? Because that's like something that I guess like I am also like more intimidated about is like just putting myself out there, just like rejection as well.
Yeah, I cried a lot in university. I had a lot of reviews that didn't go well and definitely had days where I call my mother like crying like they don't like my work. And I'm glad I did that. I got that all out of the way. So like after that I kind of had a little bit of a tough skin in terms of like not to take the work or critiques like this personal. They're not a reflection of, I mean, sometimes they can be. I take my work sometimes personal. But like you need to take like, because of the same thing like we said with the image at the homepage, like the way a person thinks is not a reflection of you. That's a lot of the case with design. Like people are going to look at something and they're going to say the things that you would never expect because that's just how they think. And so I keep that really close to me because when people look at my stuff and they may not like it or they're confused by it, it doesn't necessarily mean that like I did something wrong. It could mean that there are some things that I could do better. I deal with rejection when it comes to design very, very well. If you're going to live a very harsh life if you take every moment as like, oh man, I'm not like, it's just going to be really tough. I would say get that out of your head as quickly as possible. Putting yourself out there, can't really say that like when I was younger and I graduated school, I put myself out there, like I went and worked for years at full-time jobs. And it wasn't until like COVID really that I knew I was coming towards the end of like my full-time role career that I wanted to kind of branch out and do my own thing. I'd always sort of freelanced on the side, but I knew that I had to start in a way gaining attention to do that. And so like what better way to do that than to just post stuff on social media. We live in a very digital age where it's very easy to meet people now. It's very easy to connect with people. That was the easiest route to do that. But I say that as like, that worked for me. Like I was ready to do that. I had done things, public speaking courses. I had worked in companies that were very social in the sense of meeting with lots of different people. That talking became very comfortable for me. And so talking into a camera in my room by myself was not really a big deal. Starting off making social media videos, sure, like it sucked for a bit because I didn't know what I was doing, but I knew that like if I could figure out and get better at it, I would get better at that over time as well. It didn't come overnight. It came after 9 years, to be quite honest. Any other questions? Don't worry about notes. I'll send you notes.
Okay, cool, cool. Well, actually, I have one more question. Like, so my portfolio only has 4 pieces in it. Do you think that's too little, or do you think I should add more, or because that's something I was kind of like worried about is like not having enough like pieces.
I personally recommend, especially for someone who just graduated, a minimum of 3 to 4 projects. 4 is fine. I think you can kind of take away from this is reconfiguring how the
Yeah.
layouts of those projects, considering adding a little bit more content to them and wordsmithing some of the text that you kind of have there,
Mhm.
and really focusing on getting those projects really tight before you decide that you want to add more stuff. If we don't fix the ones that are there now, then the projects that you will potentially add will also kind of fall into these like, you won't really see any results because you'll just be mixing in more of the same stuff, right? So let's take what you have now and upgrade those a bit before you decide that you want to incorporate new things.
That's it for this portfolio review. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any questions at all, you can leave them in the comments. And if you're still watching this and you've made it all the way to the end, go ahead and leave the comment Portfolio Pro. If you would like your portfolio review, then make sure you check out the link in the description below. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to this channel, as I do portfolio reviews just like this all the time. And with that, I'll see you in the next video.